Hello and welcome into this bonus episode of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Today I've got some news and updates and a contest for you to start the show off with, and then we're going to go into an episode of the My EdTech Life Podcast where I talk to host Fonz Mendoza about the struggles that I experienced as a teacher in 2020 and 2021, balancing family and work, balancing classroom work and podcast and book and speaking work, and Fonz and I just have a good time during the chat too because Fonz is a great guy. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Owens from the Reimagine Schools podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hello, duct tapers. Welcome in. For those of you listening to the podcast for the first time, my name is Jake Miller, as my lovely wife just said in that introduction, and I am the host of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, not Tony Vincent, who you heard in the last episode. It really is me. I really am the host of the podcast. To those of you who are longtime listeners of the podcast, welcome back in. Today will still be a bonus episode. I'm really busy with the start of my regular school year, and it's hard to get out actual, full-length soapbox, intro, interview, closing, adjacent possible, everything podcast episodes. I'm working on it. I've got one coming for you, hopefully next week. And then we will get into something like a regular flow, as regular as Educational Duct Tape ever gets, with a series of regular quote-unquote episodes with guests and soapbox moments and all that good stuff that you've come to know and love, or at least know and tolerate on the show, whatever the right word for it is there. But it sounds like I'm saying that today's episode is not going to be a great one, and that's not the case. Today is an awesome episode. I recently had the opportunity to be on the My EdTech Life show and podcast with my friend Fonz Mendoza, and we had such a great time, and it was such a great chat, and maybe actually some of it wasn't fun, and you're going to find out during it, but it was such a great and important chat, I think, that Fonz and I had, that as soon as we stopped recording, I said, Fonz, after you air this in your feed, can I please air it in the Educational Duct Tape feed? Which he said yes, because he's such a great, nice guy. But I wanted to make sure that you guys heard this episode, because I think Fonz and I have some talks about, number one, the struggles that I experienced as a teacher in 2020 and 2021. And I want you to hear that. I want you to know that that's happening to all of us. The idea of learning loss and how preposterous it is. And I want you to hear that. And also how Fonz and I go about juggling family life and work life and the things that we do on the side, like our respective podcasts. So I think this is a really important episode for you guys to hear. I think you're going to enjoy it. I've got a couple things to tell you about before we get there, but then we're going to share that episode of My EdTech Life. As I mentioned before, new episodes will start up probably next week. It depends on how quick the editing and the recording goes, but I have a fun interview coming your way with a soapbox moment and all that stuff. And then hopefully every 2 weeks or so from there on out, I've gotten to be more realistic with myself as a podcaster. I used to try to be first season, I was every Wednesday, and then second season, I was every other Wednesday. And now, the third season, the wheels started to come off a little bit. And now in the fourth season, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to set goals and I'm going to aim for them. And I know that the way goals work is even if we don't hit them quite on our deadline that we were hoping to, if we hit them a couple days late, just like our students work in our classroom, we still did the learning, right? Or I still succeeded in making the podcast. So I'm aiming for every other Wednesday with some bonus episodes in between, but we'll see what I could do. It'll be roughly every 2 weeks between episodes. And hopefully I can knock that out of the park. We'll see. The best way for you to make sure you don't miss any of them is to make sure that you're subscribed to the show in Apple Podcasts or in Pandora or in Spotify or in Amazon Music or I personally use Overcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on these episodes, because I can't guarantee they're going to come out every other Wednesday. They'll come out whenever I can get them out. Maybe they'll come out early. Not likely. They'll probably come out late. But make sure you're subscribed so that you're hearing all of them. Okay, last thing I want to talk about before we get to this episode with Fonz is 2 contests relating to my new book, Educational Duct Tape and EdTech Integration Mindset. So the day that you're hearing this episode, if you're listening on the very day it's released, is the deadline for the first contest I ran related to the book. And that was a social media contest where people who have already purchased a copy of the book post a picture of themselves with the book on social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Kevin Reineman also posted a picture on MySpace. I'm not sure that really helped with book sales at all there, Kevin. But wherever you post it, if you posted it before the end of the day on September 15th, you were entered to win a free copy for a friend of yours, and you'll select whoever that friend is, and I'll send it to them. But that runs out today. So if you're listening to this on September 15th and you still you have the book and you want to run and post that picture, you will still be entered, and I'll still appreciate it. If it's after September 15th, number one, I'd still appreciate that picture, especially if you're excited about the book. That helps other people learn about the book and know that it's out there, and that social proof of, hey, I trust that person, they're a real educator, and they like the book. That does help me out. So still, if it's after September 15th, go for it. The contest will be over at that point. But that's okay, because I'm going to run another contest, and the prize is the same, a free book for a friend or a colleague, or I can even send it to you, and you can give it away to a staff and as part of a competition or something you do in your own school. And that is an audio-based contest relating to this podcast. So all you have to do is head over to the show's Flipgrid, link is in the show notes, or the show's SpeakPipe, again, link is in the show notes, and record a message, and you'll be entered to win a book for a friend or a colleague. Now, you need some rules and conditions and steps and things like that, okay? First of all, we're going to do this through the end of October. So you've got from today, September 15th-ish, until Halloween, October 31st. At the end, when the clock strikes midnight, the night of Halloween, and it becomes November, the contest is over, and I'll give away one free book to a friend of one of these listeners who record a message. So let's talk about the message now. The message can be as long or as short as you want it to be. To be honest, this is inspired by a podcast that I sometimes listen to on NPR, and I'm actually forgetting what podcast it is. You can see how effective this is. But sometimes listeners record messages that say, hey, my name is so-and-so, I'm from so-and-so, and they might say, like, I love the podcast, whatever podcast it is. I love the podcast, or, thanks for the work you do on the podcast, or whatever they say. And then the host then sticks it somewhere in the podcast. And it's a nice way to give a shout out to the audience. And I've got so many awesome people in the Educational Duct Tape audience that I want to spotlight you. So I would love for you to do one of those messages and either A, give a shout out to the book, or B, give a shout out to the podcast. Right now, obviously, the podcast has been going on for 4 years, so I'm not as much trying to push that. The book has been out for 4 weeks or something. It is in its infantile stages, so I'd love ones relating to the book from those of you who have read it. That's what I'm really looking for, but I also am up for podcast ones. Keep it short, keep it brief, doesn't have to be long. You could tell us your name, what you teach, where you're from, and say a sentence or two about either the book or the podcast. Again, I'm looking for the book. Do that either on SpeakPipe or on Flipgrid. Links are in the show notes, and I will enter you to win a free copy of the Educational Duct Tape book, either for a friend of yours or a colleague of yours, or I could send it to you to give away maybe in a staff competition or something like that if you're in a leadership position. Okay? If you have questions about that, let me know. I will promote it across the next few episodes, but you've got until the night of October 31st to enter that contest. All right, let's get into the real content of today's episode. Today, I have a discussion with Fonz Mendoza, not actually on Educational Duct Tape, but on the My EdTech Life podcast. Fonz has a really cool setup where he records it as a live video on YouTube, and then it stays up on YouTube so you could watch it, and I'll put that link in the show notes. And then he also strips the audio out of it and runs it as a podcast too. He's got the sweetest intro to a video show I've ever seen. It is so cool. You've almost got to go click the link just to watch the video intro that he runs at the beginning of all of his episodes. And I recommend starting to attend these. These are great live episodes he does. Seems like he does them every Saturday morning, but you don't have to watch with him. You can also watch them later, but you might want to just get up on Saturday morning with your cup of coffee and watch the show, and you can interact. As you'll hear in the episode, there are some people who were live, watching and typing into the comments that we were talking to during the show. So you can interact with Fonz and whoever the guest might be. But Fonz, if you don't know him, and you should go follow him, and I'll put his social media stuff in the show notes. Fonz is an educator from Texas. He is a Google certified innovator, an Adobe certified educator, a WeVideo ambassador, a Wakeland ambassador, a global GEG leader. He has a master's in EdTech. He is a doctoral student. And most importantly, he is an all-around nice guy. And as I said, this is an episode of the My EdTech Life podcast. In a moment, I'm going to press play on it, and you're going to listen to it in its entirety. I hope you love it, and I'll see you hopefully next week for a regular episode of the Educational Duct Tape podcast. But here we go with me and Fonz Mendoza on My EdTech Life. Take it away, Fonz. Actually, take it away, sweet intro music. You're just missing out on the sweet camera angles of Fonz walking around his town and sipping on coffee and stuff like that. It's super cool. You got to go watch it. But here's the music. The music's cool too.
Hello, everybody, and good morning to you all, or afternoon, depending on where you may be. It may be your afternoon, or it may already be Sunday morning. But wherever it is that you're joining us from, thank you so much for making My EdTech Life part of your day. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying your nice hot cup of coffee, maybe some breakfast, or whatever it is that you may be doing. We're just excited that you're here with us, and today we have an amazing show, and I'm just so excited for our guest that we have today. He is an amazing education leader. He is an EdTech leader. He is a great podcaster as well. And of course, a family man, which is something that is very just awesome. So well-rounded gentleman. And I'm just excited to welcome Mr. Jake Miller on the show. Jake, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, Fonz. Thanks for having me. This is exciting to do.
Awesome. Excellent. And just big shout out to Josh Tovar, who's joining us here from Texas. Josh, thank you so much for joining us this morning. But Jake, again, it's been a while. Like I was talking to you a little bit in backstage, before the show. I've been a longtime follower. I really love your work, just the way that you put things out there in just such a simplified form for all of us to understand, to enjoy, and just the tools and resources that you put out there. Definitely thankful for educators like yourself, EdTech leaders like yourself that are always willing to share the goods and share all that awesome sauce with all of us. So Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So Jake, tell us just in case for any audience members that are out there watching, anybody that's going to be listening to the show afterwards that may not know who Jake Miller is. Jake, let us know a little bit about yourself, and if you can, include maybe just something that people may not know about you.
Okay, so my bio is so complex because it kind of depends on the angle that you're coming at it from. So for anybody that does know me right now, they're like, oh, that's the guy that hosts the Educational Duct Tape podcast, or that's the guy that makes those edu gifts and shares them online, right? And that is me. That's one end of my interest in the things that I do is, working with educational technology, supporting educators, whether it's on social media or on my website or in my newsletter or on my podcast. The other part is my day job as a teacher. So I'm here in Ohio, and I currently work as an 8th grade science teacher. I've been 8th grade math and 8th grade STEM and 4th grade math and a couple other grades of math before. I've kind of bounced all over the place. And I've been a tech coach for a while too. And then last year I moved back in the classroom as an 8th grade science teacher. So not many of the people watching right now know me as an 8th grade science teacher, unless my former students are here. If any of you are here, hi guys. But yeah, I teach science here in Ohio. And then as you alluded to, the part that takes up most of my time, or at least I try to make sure it takes up most of my time, is family life. I have 3 kids and a wonderful wife that keep me busy for the other hours of the day. And I'm so lucky to have their support with the stuff that I do, because when I say that about those multiple different kind of aspects of what I'm doing, right? Like obviously teaching is a full-time job and then some, and then doing this other stuff. And this, Fonz, with the live show and stuff like that. When I'm doing the podcasting, that obviously takes up a lot of hours too. So I just have to make sure I set aside that time for the family life and those kinds of things too.
No, and I completely understand. Like right now with your bio, your resume that you're pretty much sharing with us, I was thinking to myself, I was like, where does he find time to do all of this other amazing extra stuff that you're doing? Right. The podcasting, the gifts, your newsletter, all of that stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about that work-life balance. And of course, with this, our passion projects that we have, like yours being, your podcast, your newsletters, and all the things you do. And of course, with myself, the podcast. So I'm really excited about that conversation, but just so we can get to know you a little bit more, and personally myself too, seeing you as a great education leader. I know I've mentioned that several times, but following you for years and, learning a lot from you and the tips that you share. But I really want to get to know Jake Miller a little bit more as far as the inspiration of, where it was or at what point did you decide to go into education? Can you remember or maybe pinpoint a certain?
Yeah, almost begrudgingly. Like I think teaching was kind of in my blood. Like I think many of us that are educators are just meant to be educators. Like it's just part of who we are. It's part of our personality, our style, and just what where we belong, right, is in the classroom and working with students. And my mom was a teacher, and she tried to keep me from going into teaching when I was graduating from high school. I had never even said I wanted to be a teacher. I had never even considered it. But I had done some tutoring and stuff like that when I was in high school for younger kids. And my mom said to me as I was preparing for graduation, "Listen, Jake, I know you want to be a teacher. Don't do it. It's just that you're going to work too hard. You're going to work all kinds of hours. You're going to work your tail off. You're going to get underpaid, and you're not going to get the respect you deserve. You're so bright. Go do something else and make lots of money." And as a 17-year-old or whatever, I was like, lots of money sounds like a really good idea. So I went into mechanical engineering at first in college, and I knew pretty quickly that it wasn't where I belonged, even though I've taught STEM over the years. And so I have a mind that kind of, it fits with the mechanical engineering stuff. Just that just didn't, there was nothing in there that fed me. Right. So I'm a big believer in the work of Dan Pink, his book Drive. And he talks about the three things that motivate humans are autonomy, choice over what we're doing, mastery, the ability to get better at something, and purpose, like having a greater reason for why we're doing what we're doing. And even though mechanical engineers build and invent things and create things that do have purpose, I wasn't feeling that purpose when I was in those classes. And where I found the purpose was working with young people, working with students. And so I, within my freshman year of college, switched gears to studying education. And my mom was like, I knew it. I knew he was going to do it, but I did it. And I've loved it ever since. I've changed up what I do in the classroom and where I'm at in schools and what my role is over the years. But I've known since then that being in education is where I belong.
Man, that is amazing. And I love that. And I can see, like you said, you went into engineering field, and I was like, so pretty much, and I just want to ask, is that maybe where the name of the podcast came from? Because mechanical engineering, it's like you just put duct tape on it and it should work. So I don't know. That's the first thing that I thought of. I was wondering, I was like,
I don't know. Maybe that was back in the back of my mind there.
Maybe. No, but what I love that you mentioned is, with the mechanical engineering, the skills that you gain there, at least getting that experience. But, just a lot of that does translate very well into the classroom. And especially you were talking about STEM, and STEM is such something that is very big and huge in a lot of districts, and a lot of classrooms are pushing for STEM education and so on. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that a little bit further down the show. But that's such a great story that you kind of switched gears, fell into teaching, and now you've been teaching for just years now, gaining those experiences and those different roles. What would you say would be some of maybe the three top qualities that you have gained or maybe have grown within those different types of role changes? So as you continue to move forward, what are the three qualities that stick with you that you're like, these are my pillars to continue doing great in any of these roles? Yeah,
I think the things that have helped me grow as an educator and have helped me always do my best are having a growth mindset, which I feel like I've been fortunate that I kind of naturally had coming in. I was naive at first. I thought I was going to be the world's best educator, but I very quickly realized that I wasn't, but also had a growth mindset about it. And I think in order for a growth mindset to work, you also have to have the ability to reflect. So I think that's kind of the second thing is thinking about where can I get better? What can I do better? And then I think, within those two, it goes along with growth mindset, but it's just an understanding that you do the best you can. I reference the quote from Dr. Maya Angelou a lot: do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better. And I think that mindset, I know that dovetails really well with growth mindset, but the idea of, listen, it might not be perfect. It's going to be the best I could get it to be. But this is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to reflect on it, as I mentioned earlier. And then I'm going to do that growth mindset thing. And the next time I come back at it, I'm going to do better, because now I'm going to know better. And now I'm going to do better. So I think the two big parts are the reflection and the growth mindset. And then there's that understanding that then when you do know better, then you take those steps to do better.
Excellent. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I love, especially you mentioned growth mindset, and, today, sometimes I find it very difficult where, I'll find educators, and even, whether they're friends or even I work with them, oftentimes, just that growth mindset is developing. It's there. We push them for growth, and we definitely want to help because, I mean, education is ever changing. And of course, we know that now after what happened, these last couple of months or year and a half, it's been something that has been difficult. But teachers grew. There was a lot of growth, and I'm one of those that I kind of don't subscribe to the term like maybe like learning loss, just because there was some growth in the teachers and that they taught in a different way. Maybe it just wasn't in the same traditional brick and mortar, but there was some growth. Teachers did thrive.
Oh, yeah.
There were some students also that did thrive. They were very just, self-directed, and they were able to do. But of course, there are other types of students that need just a little bit more of that, just that push, maybe just being on top of them. But there was learning that took place somewhat differently. We know that there might be some gaps that, students come back, but what is your take on that? What do you see now as an educator, as a tech coach? Maybe what are some things that you're facing, that you're seeing maybe within your district, or, and if you don't mind sharing that a little bit with us.
Yeah. So I always found, throughout this past school year, the term, I was in the classroom, and I was actually, you asked earlier, what's something people might not realize about me. I struggled last school year. I mean, last school year was really hard for me. I've been a tech coach for 5 years prior to that. And this was my first year back in the classroom since 2014 or something like that, being a full-time teacher, not just going in and co-teaching as the tech coach. And before that, my last time teaching science was 2010 or something like that. So it was a really difficult year for me, and I was working my tail off and doing my best, doing all that I could. And when I heard a term thrown around like learning loss, that stung, because I'm like, listen, we're doing our best. Our students are like, what the students did last year was just amazing and unreal, that they persevered through that really difficult situation they were in. We're like, listen, we're going to do this remote. You're going to be on Zoom, and then sometimes you're going to be in person, and some other kids are going to be on Zoom, and then this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. And they're like, then you're going to wear your masks, and then you're going to come in, but you're not going to be allowed to be close to people, and you're going to be 6 feet away, and you're going to have a plastic shield around you, and like all this crazy stuff. And that they persevere through there. And then for anybody on the outside to say that the students lost, I mean, they had a bad situation, but to call it lost just seems unfair. You don't look at a we just had the Olympics wrap up a couple weeks ago. You don't look at somebody who won the silver medal and tell them they lost. I mean, they worked their tail off. They did something really, really impressive. And did they live up to what they were really hoping to do? Maybe not. And so did we live up to the content standards that we were really hoping to master last year? Maybe not. But I wouldn't call that loss. And I think if we're measuring learning only on content standards, then we're measuring the wrong things. And certainly I think it's true that my students mastered less science standards in 2020 to 2021 than they would have mastered if it was a standard year. If COVID had never happened and we were all in the classroom face to face and everything was normal and we didn't have that extra weight on our shoulders, sure, they would have mastered more content standards. But I don't think that's a loss, because that didn't happen, right? That wasn't there to lose from. And I think the other part of it too is that learning is also like when my students someday graduate out of high school, they're not like, I'm just not hoping like, gosh, I hope they know mitosis and meiosis really well, because that's something I taught them. Now, I'm hoping that they're functional adults that are going to do really well in their careers and really well in college and stuff like that. And I think that even though this situation was really bad for them, and some of them are going to have, some social emotional issues that come out of this year, I think that they're also going to have a bank of experiences that equip them for difficulties and obstacles and for challenges in their future. So I think even though they lost in terms of content standards, the way that they handled this situation is going to equip them for their future. I think about the way I came out of high school, and I was not the kind of student that my students are going to be 5 years from now when they graduate. As Jay said in the chat there, they learned flexibility. What a huge life skill. Mm-hmm. They learned a lot of different life skills through this process. We certainly wouldn't wish this process on them, but we can't call it learning loss because they grew in a lot of other ways too.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And one of the things, and I think Omar was saying here as well, students learned more because, more than academics, they learned about life. Yeah. That's pretty much what is coming in here in the chat. So I just want to give a shout out to Omar Lopez, who's actually my neighbor right down the street. Thank you for joining, Omar. Thank you for joining Amanda Macias, tech coach out of California. We've got Jay here in the chat. We've got Amel, who's joining us from Colombia. Thank you so much. And of course, Mr. Teachers on Fire himself, Mr. Tim Cavey. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. But, one of the things that I wanted to, share is I know at least within our state before, we're coming back now face to face and, state exams were taken, maybe in March or actually in April, May. They had said, okay, this isn't going to count. This isn't going to, it's just for data, just to see where the kids are. And then, of course, there was a push, like we got to bring the students in, got to bring them in so they can take this test. And now all of a sudden, based on those scores that weren't supposed to count, now we're making decisions and we're saying like, oh, look, there's learning loss. And like you said, I was like, wait a minute, this is interesting. So I agree with everything that you said. But one of the things that I have seen, and I don't know if you've seen it, because teachers are evaluated based on scores. So when somebody says, well, the students didn't do well, considering everything was online, everything was virtual, and they're like, well, the scores didn't come back, they didn't do very well. Well, for a teacher who prides themselves in their work and, of course, being successful, for a lot of them right now, a lot of them are feeling just disheartened. They're feeling helpless. They're feeling, just alone, like they have no support. And I kind of saw that a little bit in the last couple of days. And then in just talking to some of my friends too, as well, because it's like, well, the scores reflect this, like, I'm not a good teacher. Like I didn't do a good job. I was like, well, wait a minute. Yeah. No. That don't think about it that way. Even though the scores didn't come out very well. I mean, based at least on the state, our scores did very well compared to other places around the state, all things considering. But it's oftentimes, instead of saying, hey, you know what, it's okay, all things considering, we all did very well collectively and so on. But it's more like, well, they're not where we were. Yeah. Obviously, when we were face to face, well, you can't compare that.
It's apples and oranges.
It's apples and oranges. And a lot of teachers, I just, my heart goes out to them because I see them, I hear them. And, they really, they need that support. They need to feel supported. They need to feel like, hey, you know what, this is okay. We're going to get through this. We're going to move on and we're going to move up and so on. But right now, I mean, I've seen teachers that still haven't recovered and they're just putting on that smile and, just going through and pushing through. And that really concerns me and worries me, because, educators, they've worked so hard. And then just like you said, just because of a score, now it's like, well, we're going to move you. You're going to go there. You're going to go here, and you're shaking up their world. And I was like, to me, I'm like, wow, that's unfair. So, yeah. And
you think about too, in our current culture, not only are they seeing those scores and internalizing them and things like that, but when my mom was telling me back in 1997 or whatever it was that teachers were underappreciated and maybe I shouldn't go into the career, she was seeing, like, imagine her realizing in 1997 that teachers were underappreciated when there was no social media to tell her that they weren't appreciated. Right now, we're bombarded by this stuff on all of the platforms we go on, depending on what kind of community we keep on them, but we know it's there. And so now not only are teachers feeling burnout from the year, feeling frustrated about their scores, feeling disappointed that maybe their district was prioritizing their scores when it wasn't the priority, but also they're seeing stuff on social media that maybe badmouths the profession and things like that and trivializes the work that teachers do. So yeah, it's hard. My heart goes out for all the other teachers because I know how hard it was for me, and I know how hard it was for a lot of them, because at least I was coming into it feeling equipped to use the technology. So they made these huge gains in technology use and worked their tails off for the students. And to be, then not receive the praise that they deserve on the other end is frustrating for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. So kind of going into, just along those lines right now, Jake, what you're seeing, you don't have to, specifically talk about your district, but maybe that you're very well connected and you've got a lot of friends in your PLN and everything, and maybe what you're hearing, but what is your biggest fear right now that you may be thinking in terms of education? Is there anything on your mind right now, or maybe that just comes up, every once in a while, like, man, I hope that doesn't happen, or man, I hope we can fix this. Well, what is your biggest fear right now?
I guess my biggest fear is kind of what I was just saying, is that teachers don't realize the value in what they do. Sometimes we hear loud voices or loud information inputs that are a minority of opinion or a minority of data or whatever it might be. And it's easy to feel down about ourselves, not just in teaching, but in any walk of life, to feel down about what we're doing or something like that, and feel bad. And I just hope that teachers don't fall into that trap, because that trap has certainly been set for them, and I hope they see the value in the work they do, the appreciation from the students they have, the appreciation from most of the parents that they work with, and continue to fight through this, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully we come out at the end with these teachers, social emotional well-being still intact and ready to keep doing awesome stuff for kids. But my fear is that it's going to get too loud for them, right? All these inputs are going to get too loud for them.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm really glad that you're sharing that. I'm just really, also really thankful for just your being sincere and your honesty and sharing your experiences, because I know that that's something that maybe not a lot of people want to voice or share, but keep it to themselves. But thank you so much for advocating and for sharing and all that good stuff. So appreciate it. Well, let's kind of just change the mood a little bit here also, and let's talk a little bit more.
We're a little bit heavy, Fonz.
Yeah, we got heavy, but it's good. It's good that we just have these real conversations. These are things that need to be talked about and need to be had. And appreciate all our audience members right now that are just commenting and viewing this, and also just being agreeing with everything that we're talking about. So. But let's kind of just lighten the mood a little bit now, and just talk a little bit now. Let's go into your EdTech, life in that sense. So I want to talk a little bit about Jake Miller and what inspired you to first start putting, your tips and everything onto social media. Was there a specific thing that you saw, like, hey, I found this cool thing, let me just share it with everybody? What was the inspiration behind that?
I think we always learn from the things that we try out and we observe, maybe the way something felt for us or what we liked about something and didn't like. And I, relatively early on in my teaching career, realized how much I enjoyed helping other educators with EdTech, because it came relatively easy to me and was something that I was excited about. I got really excited about what I could do in my classroom with educational technology and how it benefited my students. And then I started sharing about it with my teaching team and across my school building and across my school district. And then I wanted to go further than that. And social media became one of those ways of doing that. And I just found that I had this information, and I knew that other educators would value it. I knew that other educators wanted to do the best they could for their students. I just knew that they maybe didn't know what steps to take, or didn't know how to get there, or knew that, especially 10, 15 years ago, when information on YouTube and stuff like that wasn't as readily available, they maybe didn't know where to look or how to learn how to do this or how to make these decisions. And I just found that I felt really good being that person to provide that information. And there are a lot of other people out there doing a wonderful job of doing it too, but I just felt like I had this information inside of me, and I wanted to share it out there. And then it actually got to a point where I was then learning more for the purpose of sharing more. I wanted to be the person who, almost the way a journalist takes this large chunk of news and large information and really digs into a situation, whether it's political or whatever it might be, and not waters it down, but summarizes it for the general public to get it out there. And that's what I kind of wanted to be, was that service that took something that maybe was too time consuming and too much information for a busy teacher to go out there and process, and try to summarize it for them. Go listen, here's what you need to know. Here's some of the things impactful. And then seeing those people appreciate it, then just put more gas in the tank to do more of it.
Man, that's great. So I love it. So how long have you been on Twitter now and just been sharing your tips?
Yeah. So I started my Twitter account probably in 2011 would be my guess. I'm not actually sure. When I actually started it, I still remember the night that I decided to start a Twitter account. There was a friend in my school district who was using Twitter with high schoolers, and I was teaching middle school at the time. And he had tried to get me on, and I really didn't see the value of it because most of my middle schoolers weren't on Twitter at the time, although some of them were starting to get on. And when I realized I wanted to do Twitter was one night I was taking the garbage out. Why this happened, we'll take the garbage out. And I looked up at the sky, and I see the stars. It was a super clear night, and I look up at the stars, and I'm like, oh, and I can't remember what I saw, like whether it was a planet or a constellation or something. And I was like, I wish I could tell my students about this right now. And I'm like, I could tell them about it tomorrow, but they'll be, obviously the sky won't be dark anymore. It'll be too late. And I would just be telling that happened. So I'm like, I need something where I could just post messages for my students whenever I want to. And so I got on Twitter, and I found out pretty quickly that my students didn't care what I posted on Twitter. They had no interest in my posting on Twitter. So that part of using Twitter flamed out really quickly because they just didn't care. But then I discovered these other people on Twitter, all of these people who weren't in my school, right? Those people, so many of us who are excited, like truly, truly passionate about education or educational technology, we feel a little alone in our school buildings sometimes. Where there's a lot of other teachers who maybe aren't as outwardly excited about it as we are. And then I got on Twitter, and I'm like, these are my people. Here are my people, right? So that's when I got on and started participating in some chats and discussing things and learning from others and then sharing with others. And it's been a part of my life ever since then. And I can't give it up. I hope that it doesn't go away because I enjoy it so much.
Oh, no, you and me both, my friend. And that's really where I have learned to hone in my skills and, of course, add more tools to the teacher tool belt and just add that additional seasoning to my practice. And just like Amanda was saying here, I really love what she put here. She put, when you learn, teach, when you get, give by Maya Angelou. So thank you, Amanda, for sharing that. And of course, talking about the PLF, those are our people. I call it my PLF because everybody that I connect with, I consider them family because I'm learning from them. I'm connecting with them. I keep those conversations open, collaboration, but you're absolutely right. There may be some people that you find that are not as excited about the cool things that you can do with a GIF and share and make learning visual, and then just the little extra tech tool that you have just to help you with that flow. But here on Twitter, you just find people that are really passionate about, what we do as far as EdTech. And, that's the thing that I love. And that's why it feels like family. These are our people. So I love that. And being able to connect with myself, being able to connect with people like you that have put out some amazing, great content, and the way that you put it out there in a nice little bite-sized chunk, and of course making it very visual with a GIF. Teachers, it's just all I have to do is just follow the GIF. I don't even have to turn the audio on or anything if there was even any audio, and just follow the clicks. And I'm like, oh, okay, there we go. We found that solution. So that's wonderful. So I really appreciate your work there and that you've been doing, because a lot of us definitely in this role as a maybe instructional technologist or even in the classroom have definitely used maybe a lot of the content that you put out there to help us. So thank you for what it is that you do and being that leader that you are.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, more of those connections. So now you started with Twitter, putting stuff out there. You found your PLN, your PLF, and then where did the inspiration come from for the podcast now?
Yeah. So podcast starting season 4 this year, which is just insane to me. Something like awesome. I think just this morning I was looking at released an episode last week, and I'll go back a week or so later just to see what the listenership statistics are, just to see if it's going up or going down. I'm not like really worried about the stats, but I'll go look. And so while I was looking, I was like, wait a minute, am I about to start season 4 or season 3? And I go back and look. It's just been so long now that I had to go back and double check that. But yeah, it started because there were a collection of reasons, but I think the biggest one was I was looking at the stuff that I was sharing, and I was sharing a lot of those bite-sized edu-gifs, like you mentioned there, that were teaching people how to, make a table in a Google Doc or add bold font into their comments in Google Docs. And these are things that I want educators to learn about, but there was so much more that I wanted to say that didn't fit in the 280 characters. And I found that most of the stuff that naturally fit into what I could share on Twitter was maybe how to do something with technology. And I think that's part of it. But there was this other part of my mind and what I wanted to share that was kind of the mindset about integrating these things, right? That you don't need to use them all, right? Why might you use this thing? And why might you not use that thing? And why might you choose this over this? And why, just the thought process of going through these different things. And that really didn't work on Twitter. There really wasn't a way for me to share that kind of stuff on Twitter. And I just wanted a way to have a conversation with educators. And the podcast became that space. I was a big podcast listener, and I still am. I used to be a huge music buff. Like if you look around my room right now, you see a bunch of concert posters around me from concerts I've gone to over the years. I almost never turn on music anymore. I just turn on podcast because I'm just hooked on podcasts. And so, like I said, three and a half years ago or whatever it was, I wanted to start having a conversation with the educators. I wanted to start sharing my opinion with educators and my thoughts and my beliefs with educators. And the podcast became a perfect place to do that. There were some other things that I wanted to achieve by doing it. I love speaking. I love speaking at conferences, whether they're virtual or in person. And I found that maybe I wasn't the greatest speaker. I wasn't a good speaker. I was reflecting on what I was doing, and I was like, man, that was some good information, Jake, but that just didn't come out well. And I was like, I need to practice this speaking thing. Oh, a podcast. That'd be great practice. And then I was a guest on a couple podcasts, and they would ask me a question, and I'd be like, and then I would say my answer. And then at the end of the answer, I go like, oh, why didn't I say whatever? And I was like, I need to get better at having these kinds of conversations. And the podcast became a way to do that. And the other thing was I wanted to get out a book in the future. I had these ideas for this book, and I'm like, I need to figure out what resonates, what works, what goes in, what goes out, what order things go in, how I should say different things. And I realized that the podcast would also be a great way to kind of grow that message and kind of practice it in a way, like almost a rough draft of the things that would become a book. So the biggest part was having that conversation with educators and sharing it. But there were also some personal growth goals that were in there too.
Excellent.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, well, you mentioned a book. So let's talk a little bit about that. I know that you've got a book you mentioned that will be releasing soon. Tell us a little bit about the book, how it came about, and what the big idea behind the book is. Yeah,
so the book is called The Educational Duct Tape, an EdTech Integration Mindset. It should come out. I really don't know. I'm waiting on the editor on the very last stage of it. And so I think whenever they send that back to me, it'll be out maybe 4 days after that, because they essentially just upload to Amazon, and then you're waiting for Amazon to start actually printing it and shipping it out. So it could be within a week of today. I really don't know. I'm excited to get it out there. It's funny to be like looking at, is it going to be Wednesday or Thursday? Like how many days away? Is it going to be 4 days or 5 days? Because in the grand scheme of things, I've been working on this thing for over 3 years. So at this point, it's like, it's 3 years regardless. Like it doesn't matter as long as it doesn't come out 2 months from now. Like this is still roughly like that's a rounding error away based on what day it comes out. But so it really is. It really is a lot of the podcast. So for people who listen to the Educational Duct Tape podcast, there's kind of two main parts to the podcast. One is what I call a soapbox moment, which is just kind of a name that I gave to it randomly in one early episode that I just felt like stuck, and I just liked it, so I kept it. But the soapbox moment is kind of my spot to share some kind of motivational or fun message with educators to help them in their day, whether it's motivational or an affirmation message or an EdTech mindset kind of thing. Like this is how you approach these kinds of problems. So that's part of the book. Each chapter has like one of those, like that kind of feel in it. But then the other part of the book is what the true meat of my podcast is, which is asking a question that a teacher might have, like, how can I formatively assess my students? How can I hear from all of my students? How can I empower my students? How can I create student-paced learning in my classroom? Whatever it might be, asking that question and then identifying some tools that could work with it. So each chapter then has a question like that. And then I cover like 5 or 6 or 7 different tools that might be the answer to that. And my goal is that the reader goes, first of all, that first part of the chapter empowers them and motivates them and inspires them and makes them feel good about their growth. And then that second part of the chapter, it has that question, and then they then feel, based on the message I've already provided them, they feel equipped to decide if that's a question they even have. Like maybe they're not worried about formative assessment. Maybe they're really good at it already. Or maybe they do want to hear from all of their students, but that's just not a front of the line goal for them. They have other things that are priorities right now. Or maybe student-paced learning feels like it's 2 years off for them, right? We'll get to that later, So they get to that question and they go like, is this something I have to do or not? And then once they decide if it is, then I cover, the 4 or 5 or 6 different tools for it in, a page or so each, maybe a little less than a page. And they get enough information about the tool to decide if it's the one for them or not. And then they leave the book knowing, okay, this is the question I'm trying to answer. This is the tool I'm going to use for it. And now I just have to put it in place to use it. And then I've built, or I am building actually, as I wait for the book to come out, the back end of the book, which is an online site that gives them resources to then learn how to use those tools. So let's say they read that and they go, okay, I'm going to learn how to use BlueKit. I'm just picking that out. Mm-hmm. Then they go to the site and they learn how to use BlueKit. And so it takes that next step of then helping them actually do that learning. But yeah, the writing process, literally, if you look at that Google Doc that I wrote it in, it probably was first opened in late 2018 or something like that. And some of those messages that are in there, I've been kind of fiddling with since well before that too. And so it's definitely been a labor of love, that's for sure.
Well, that's wonderful, Jake, and I really appreciate that hard work that you've put into, because it just shows your passion for bringing great content, instruction, resources to educators. You're giving yourself, you're pouring out what you've used that is tried and true, maybe some of your methods, some of the tools that you have, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to read great. And because you have always focused on the teachers as well, like you said, you're listening. You're getting their questions, and now you're providing some answers, and more than one answer based on, different platforms, and giving them, the tools, the guidance to just get clicky with it. I always tell my people here at our district is just get clicky with it. You can't break anything. Just click undo, Control Z, but experiment. But they leave confident, like you said, leaving the book. Now they can go and try it out. If maybe something might not be working, they can refer back to the site that you're building now. So I think that is wonderful. That's a great way to put out your content and just being repurposed continually, and people coming back to visit and so on. So that's such a great idea, man. That is amazing. So I'm really excited about that book coming out now for sure too.
Thanks.
Yeah, excellent. All right, man. So now let's talk a little bit about that work, life, passion project balance, all of these things going on all at once, full-time job as a teacher. You've got your webpage, podcast, your newsletters, you've got all of that. But most important component, and one of the things that like we talked about earlier, is just definitely just that family support. So let's talk a little bit about that, and again, you can elaborate as much as you like or as little as you like. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know in your bio, that's one of the things. I'm going
to air some dirty laundry here, huh?
Yeah. One of the things on your bio that really stuck out is like, hey, I am, my most important job, is a husband, as a father, so talk to us. I want to know who Jake Miller, the father, Jake Miller, the husband is, just so our audience members can, really see like, hey, he's like us, like, he's a person. Cause like I was mentioning to you, a lot of times people see, it's like, oh no, like they're like edu-famous and no, I can't go talk to them. I can't approach them. But I'm like, we're people,
regular dudes.
Yeah. Like we're just regular dudes, and stuff like that. So talk to us a little bit about how, you find that work-life balance with your family, and then just getting that support from your family too as well, man. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so the family stuff comes first for me, and I think it should come first for everybody. And I think a lot of people look like you kind of hinted at it earlier and go like, how are you managing to get out all this stuff and at the same time do all the other family stuff? And I sometimes I wonder if people are watching and going like, Jake must spend no time with his kids because he's got all this stuff coming out. But in reality, it looks that way from the outside. Like, oh, he's got so much, you're doing so much. But from the inside, I'm like, gosh, I wish I was doing more. Because I just do as much as I can. Right. And I prioritize the time with my kids. Like I have a rule. If my kids ask me to play with them, I'm going to play with them. If my wife asks me to go do whatever, like go for a hike somewhere or go out to dinner somewhere or whatever it is, like I'm going to say yes, right? Because when I'm like, hey, tomorrow morning from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., I'm doing an interview with Fonz, they're all like, okay, go for it. Right. Because I get that support when I need the time. And then when they ask for something else, I go for that. Especially the things with my kids where they're asking me to play with them, because that's only going to last for so much longer. A couple of years they're all going to say I'm lame and not want to play with me anymore anyhow. So I've got to take that time while I've got it. But so those things always are a priority for me. And some days I manage to get in a lot of time to do work, and other days I don't. Like yesterday, I had some adventures to go on with my kids. I had some stuff to play with my kids. We watched the movie Vivo last night with the kids, which was an amazing movie. I had to visit my parents yesterday. My dad needed help installing a microwave. We hadn't seen my aunt in a while, so I had to go visit my aunt. And I got a half an hour of work in last night. That was it, a half an hour, and that was it. And I just have grown to the point where I'm like, I will accept the time that I get. I will do as much as I can with it. I will do whatever I consider a priority at that time. And I won't mourn the loss of that other time to get work done, because I'm using that time for something more important, right? I'm using that time for time with my wife or time with my kids or time with my family. That stuff has to be more important. So I used to be sad that I wasn't getting more time. And like, if I get a podcast and I release that episode late, I'd be like, oh, I'm bummed that I released that episode a day or two behind when I wanted to. I now have started looking at it the other way and gone like, I lost that hour of time to work on the podcast. I gained that hour of playing catch with the son or on a bike with my daughter or whatever it is. And those things are a priority for me. So when I get home from work in the evening from school, I don't, come down and start recording a podcast episode. I play with my kids. But when my kids are like, hey, we're all going to go on our screen for a half an hour, and my son gets on his Xbox and my other son starts playing Legend of Zelda on his Switch, and my daughter starts watching High School Musical, the series on her iPad, I'm like, okay, I got a half an hour. And I like go down to my computer and I knock out half an hour work. And then when I see a kid peek around the corner, I'm like, all right, it's time. They turn it all off, shut it down, and go be dad, because those things are the priorities. So I just fit it in when I can, and I do as much as I can. And sometimes I wish I was doing more, but I like I said, I'm doing more of the other stuff, and that's the important stuff. And that is what it is.
That's great. That's great. And that's great advice for anybody that is out there that, wants to get into either the podcast scene or content creation and so on, because this is time consuming. It really is, but it's something that we're passionate about. And for myself, I guess in a way it was also a blessing in disguise that, during this time right now, I have classes that now are Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and I'm taking some courses because, man, I was going 2 shows a week. I was doing Wednesdays and Saturdays, and now things have calmed down to where it's just Saturdays. And then now I'm like, hey, you know what? This is all right. Once a week, it's okay. You find that work-life balance. I have more time, but because in reality, this can be very time consuming. And, it's important to have that support. And I'm so glad, like you said, your wife, your family, your kiddos and everything, they support you. And then in turn, it's like, hey, let's find that time. And same thing here, it's without the support of my wife, who just supports all my crazy ideas and doing all this. But hey, we make that time. So I'm just really excited. And so thank you for sharing a little bit of the dad life, husband life, that's something that's very important.
Yeah. Hey, on that point you mentioned there of going from 2 shows to 1 show, that was something I wrestled with my podcast. I was a weekly show, and then I dialed it back to an every other week show because I just couldn't manage a weekly show anymore. And now I've gotten to the point where it's a whenever the heck I can get an out show. It might be once every 2 weeks. It might be once every 3 weeks. It might be coming on a Monday versus a Wednesday. Like, I like to keep to the same day and stuff like that, but I just do what I can. And I realized through that experience, and I'm sure you realize this too, the only person keeping score of what you're accomplishing is you. Like, nobody else is keeping score. Like, nobody's going like, ooh, Fonz dialed it back to just 1 show a week. Like, he must be struggling or something. Like, nobody else is watching that. You're the one watching that. Like, certainly there are people out there who maybe miss that other episode, or maybe wish there was a couple more episodes of Educational Duct Tape out there, but they're not keeping score of it the way we think they might be. That's us keeping score of that. So we have to give ourselves permission to dial that back sometimes.
Yeah, you know what? That is a great point, because that's the way I first started. It's like every other week. Then I said, hey, let's go ahead and start cranking these out. And I was like, all right, Wednesday, Saturday. And now I'm back just to Saturdays. I'm like, hey, this is good. This is all right. This is manageable. And then just getting all those little sound bites, in during the week just to continue the promos and all that stuff. But like you said, and I'm glad that you shared that, because I think that's something really that I needed to hear, that it really is myself that is just keeping the score, and, not anybody else. But again, it's important to prioritize, our family first. And in my case, it's just, spending that time with my lovely wife and just going out to our Home Depot trips and working on our yard and all that good stuff. So, and I love it. So it's great.
I think the same's true in our classrooms too, right? You have those, you might feel guilty not doing this one amazing project or super amazing lesson this week or something, but the only person who knows you didn't do it is you, right? As long as you're still showing up for your students, and caring for them, like they're still getting the value out of you, right? So sometimes you've got to go like, you know what, I'd love to do this kind of project now or this kind of lesson now. But if you can't manage it, if you don't have the time, you're the only one keeping score of that. And you've just got to give yourself permission to take a pass on it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I want to give also a shout out to Erica Sandstrom, who's joining us. She's giving us a hi, and she says, Jake and Fonz, two of my fave souls. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. I love that Erica's pictures her in front of a green screen too, because of course it is.
Yes, of course. Why not? She is amazing. And of course she says here, Jake, great advice. So that is awesome. Love it. And Amanda, quality over quantity, friends. So you're right, Amanda. You're right. Thank you so much. And so let's go ahead and kind of wrap up with my two favorite questions that I love to ask any guest here. And one of those questions is, Jake, if you yourself could have any billboard or could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
I think the message I want people to see, and I think this is something I alluded to earlier, is that teachers are awesome. Like I just wanted to say just 3 words: teachers are awesome, because I want the teachers to see it and be reminded of it and go like, yeah, we do kick some butt. We are awesome. And I want everybody else to be reminded of it too. Like I think teachers need to hear that more, because when I go to a professional development or present virtually online, and these teachers are here at 9 a.m. on a summer day, and they're still learning more for their students to get even better for them. I'm like, you guys are just awesome. Like, this is so cool that you're doing this. Like, you went through the hardest year ever and you're still learning more. Teachers are awesome. Like, that's what the sign needs to say. I know I want to see that sign as I'm driving into work next week when my school year starts. And I think other teachers deserve to see it too.
Excellent. Great point. I love it. And the last question, Jake, if you and I were to switch roles and I was your guest, what would be one question that you would love to ask me?
Well, Fonz, I think we need to actually switch sides of the table and have you on the other side of the table on educational duct tape sometimes. I think we're actually going to do that sometime if you're up for it.
Yeah, I'm up for it anytime, my friend.
Good. So this is my chance to warm up for when we actually do that. I want to know why YouTube Live. I think there's so much vulnerability in recording live. When I record that podcast, it's 10:30 at night. Nobody else is listening but me and the guest. And then a couple weeks later, I air it. And there's the ability to edit stuff out. Why live? Why do you like it this way?
You know what? That is a great question, Jake. And I get that often from, Tim, and I get that from everybody. The reason that I do this is because when I was, like you said, going back into my classroom teaching, you're live, you're on there, and you're putting yourself out there, and you're vulnerable. You're out there. If something doesn't turn out well, it doesn't turn out well. But hey, it is what it is. You went through it, and just like you mentioned earlier, say, hey, you know what? You tried. You did. You gave it your best, but maybe you had this technical glitch. Like, I'll have some audio that may not be heard clearly, and so on and so forth. But just that live aspect is, I just want to give people just that feeling that they are there. They're seeing this live. We are vulnerable. The answers that we give are answers that are coming just straight from our heart, and just to capture those moments, because sometimes you may not get that feeling. Like, if I'm a viewer and I'm watching something that might be pre-recorded, do I really get that feeling from hearing it and watching it live? And again, it is what it is. I just want to be authentic, genuine. If we make a mistake, I want other podcasters or anybody else that may want to try to go live say, hey, you know what? Fonz made a mistake.
Right.
And look, he just kept going. No big deal. And so that's always been my workflow. And also, Jake, is because going back to that time issue, I just download everything. And as it is, I just upload everything straight into Anchor.
Yes.
Whether it has, compression, bad compression, or little glitches or artifacts, I just put it up there because it's just real, it's genuine, and it's about just getting the content out there. So that's really my reasoning behind it. And again, I don't mind being vulnerable. And sometimes, like I said, you might get those little reactions in that moment from that guest that if something is planned out or recorded, maybe it doesn't give off that feeling, what I mean?
Yeah. I like that your answer was really, and this is what I try to preach to educators about technology all the time, is you have a very specific set of goals and parameters that you're trying to stick to here, which is, as Omar said there, you're trying to keep it real, right? That's your big goal of why you're doing this way. And as Amanda said, the authenticity. And then Erica just likes to be along with the ride. And then the other part of it is, when we choose a technology, we need a technology that works well for our situation, right? Whatever the specifics of our situation is. And as you said, it's that time aspect, right? So doing it live in a way saves you time. So it meets some goals that you have in the fact that it's real, right? It's a real vulnerable conversation. It sets that example and puts you up as a kind of a role model in a way. But then it also fits those parameters of needing it to be an efficient way of doing it. And this certainly is more efficient than recording and then editing and then publishing and then, you know what I mean? And it saves you time. So I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I love what Omar says here too. As an audience member, he feels that he can connect with both the host and the guest. He's seen us here drinking our coffee, having our conversation. And then it says, let's say what Jay's asking, says, we need to know that we can't always rely on tech, and shows more vulnerability. Mm-hmm. You're right. And that's what the biggest thing with me and the lesson that I have always taken from my years of experience in teaching. It wasn't until I started teaching elementary. I went from high school to elementary, but really that's where I feel like I honed in more of my skills, and that I was able to be vulnerable. Like I allowed my students to see like, ooh, you know what, that didn't work out as good as I thought. Let's revisit that tomorrow. But then a lot of students would say, no worries, Mr. Mendoza, we got this. Look, instead of doing that, try this, and giving them the time to experiment. And then I found out like, hey, even if I make a mistake, some of my kids may catch me and say, hey, what if we try it this way? And I'd be like, okay, let's go for it. And you just continue, and it built that community. And even now too, putting myself out here, like with you, this interview and all of our guests, it just takes me back to the classroom moments where things may not work out, but the message is there. And like Omar said, you just feel that connection, that community, that PLF, that personal learning family. We're all connected and we're here together. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, great answer too.
Yeah. All right. But we'll definitely have to work on that. I'm always excited to be on the receiving end of the questions, so that's always something interesting. But yeah, anytime we can definitely schedule that.
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
Thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate just your authenticity, how genuine you are, your answers, your heart more than anything for the education community, your heart as a husband, your heart as a father, and everything that you do. I wish you continued success. And I can tell you that I'm definitely very excited about your book. I'm excited about what you're doing as far as the website too as well. And I can assure you that everybody in our education community will definitely benefit from that. So thank you for what you do. You are awesome. Continue doing what you're doing, my friend, because it is making a difference and you are making an impact. So I just want to leave you with that.
Yeah, same to you, buddy. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. And for all our audience members and anybody that's going to be rewatching this or listening to this, thank you so much, as always, from the bottom of my heart, for making My EdTech Life what it is. I appreciate all of your support, all of your shares. Drop by our website, myedtech.life. Give us a review. Reach out to us. Give us some feedback. Guys, I'm always looking to bring you the best of me, the best of the show. And by you giving me feedback, that'll help me grow and continue to bring you some amazing shows, bring you some amazing guests, and change anything that I need to change just to really just hit a home run every time that I do a show. So thank you so much again, as always. And I'm really excited. We will be having a next show will be coming up this next Saturday. And we've got the hosts of the Punk Rock Classroom will be here. You don't want to miss that show. It is going to be a rockin' show. So really excited about that. So thank you to Omar, to Jay, to Amanda, to Erica, to Mel, who joined us too as well. All of our people here that were commenting, thank you so much. And as always, Jake, you are welcome back anytime you are part of my PLF. Anytime you'd like to come back for anything, promote anything, any projects you've got going on, you always have an open invitation, my friend.
Thanks, Fonz. Thanks, everybody.
All right, guys. And don't forget, guys, till next time, stay techie.
How fun was that? Thank you so much to Fonz for having me on the show and for letting me air it here in the Educational Duct Tape feed for all the duct tapers to hear. I hope you guys will go follow Fonz and subscribe to that podcast that he hosts, the My EdTech Life Podcast, and tune in for the live airings of the episode so that you can ask some questions. Also, don't forget about that contest I told you about. Send in an audio recording via SpeakPipe or via Flipgrid, preferably about the Educational Duct Tape book. Let us know who you are, what you teach, and where you're from, and maybe a few sentences about what you think about the book. And you'll hear that audio in an upcoming episode of the podcast. So please do that, and you might win a copy for a friend or colleague. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you know when the next episode comes out. Hopefully a week from today. We'll see how quickly I get it out. But I will be back soon with you, duct taper friends. Have a great day. Thanks for all that you do as educators. Remember, as a parent, I'm grateful for you. And as an educator, I'm proud of you. See you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please visit eduducttape.com to join the discussion, share possible topics, inquire about being a guest, or contact Jake. And remember, duct is spelled with a T, not a quack quack K.